Well, we made two attempts to canoe from Cochrane, Ontario to Moosonee, and we didn't make it either time. On the second trip, we had made the portage at Otter Rapids Dam, and we camped at New Post Creek, which I already told you about, and then the river rose very high because of the thunderstorm that had come that afternoon. And they had to spill water at the dam, so that was what caused that excitement. But we had to keep on going, and eventually we had to switch to the Anacawana River, which is a very narrow thing. It's about maybe 3 meters wide and 1 meter deep. And you have to make a fairly long portage, probably a couple miles, to get from the Abitibi, which is a huge river, into the Anacawana. So we camped at where we were going to get into the Anacawana overnight, and in the morning we got in and started downstream, and about after 100 yards we hit a huge log jam, which we were able to either cut our way under or drag the canoes over. Mostly we had to drag the canoes fully loaded over the log jams. You couldn't get out on the bank because the trees are right down to the water's edge. And so we would get past one log jam, and then we'd hit another log jam about 100 yards further on. So we had probably made our way past maybe 35 of these things. I lost count rather quickly because they all looked the same, and I never knew which one we had just covered. And so Mark Hall, I think it was, or maybe it was Matt Hall, was using my little backpack saw. I thought, why do we need to take a whole bunch of saws? Let's just take one and let everybody use it. So he had cut our way through a log jam, and he folded up the saw and he threw it at my canoe. It landed on the keel inside the canoe and bounced right out and into the river. And of course he was devastated because we needed that saw to make our way down the river. But I wouldn't let him dive for it because there was a big strainer there. And I said, if you get caught in that strainer, we'll never get you out before you drown. So he said, but we need the saw. And I said, this has to be the last log jam because God wouldn't have taken the saw away from us if we needed it. So we got through that log jam and we started down the river, and then another log jam was maybe 100 yards in front of us, and we got there and there was an opening on the left edge just wide enough for a canoe to go through. And then there was another log jam with the same thing but on the other side, and this happened half a dozen times and he couldn't believe it. So I said that somebody is going to need this saw maybe in 10 or 20 years, and they're going to find it because we lost it here just for them. And that kind of blew him away. That was what could happen on the Abitibi. So we made it to what turned out to be a reasonable campsite, but it was up on a high bank, and the guys scrambled up there, and then they tied ropes to the trees so they could drop the ends down so we could tie packs to them and they could haul them up. So this idiot, Kamenetsky, he comes over to help, and I said, throw the rope down, Andre. And so the dumb guy unties it from the tree and throws the whole thing into the canoe. And of course, that wasn't exactly what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to throw the loose end down so we could tie another pack to it. Well, the next day we continued our canoeing, and we had canoed for several hours, and I saw this little island. Oh, I should back up. When we were washing dishes that night, I was drying them and trying to put the stuff away, and I would walk over to where my tool kit was so I could put the forks and spoons in there, and I couldn't remember why I was there. I had to go back and start over again. I did that 4 or 5 times. And Mr. Knowlton said, you're so tired you don't even realize it. And John Knowlton said, I want to quit. And so we took a vote, and the guys decided they wanted to stop the trip because it was just plain hard work. It wasn't fun anymore. So the next day we saw this little tiny island we were trying to get to the Anacawana River bridge crossing because the train from Moosonee would pass there, and we decided we would just take a bag of trail mix and eat that and not even stop for lunch. We would get to the train depot if we could before the train got there. And I saw this.
How often did the train?
The train goes twice a week in either direction, and this was the last train of the week, and the next train would be Thursday. I think this was Saturday. So, yeah. It's on Monday and Wednesday, and I think they come south on Thursday and Saturday. And it was the Saturday train we were going to catch, and so the next train would have been Wednesday the following week. So I saw this little island in the river, and John Knowlton said, "Oh, I think I remember seeing that on the map," because he'd studied it extensively before we took off that morning. So I got out the maps and started looking, and it was 6 kilometers from there to the Anacawana River bridge crossing. So I yelled at everybody to paddle as hard as they could, and whoever got there first to run up to the train track and flag the train down if it comes. And
What time the train?
well, I knew approximately when it left Moosonee, and I figured it would take 3 hours to get to the bridge. But I didn't know exactly what time it would get there, and we were sufficiently close to the train track that we could hear the train. I was sure we could hear the train if it passed before we got there. So we all got to the Anacawana River Bridge and together, and so 8 of us grabbed one canoe and ran it up to the train track. It was about 100 yards, I think, and then we ran back and grabbed another canoe and hauled it up. So we had all 4 canoes standing or sitting beside the train track, just pointing, ready to go. And then somebody, Mr. Nolan decided he was so grubby he wanted a clean shirt, so he fished through his pack until he found one, and we found some oranges, so we decided we'd have those for lunch because we'd been having trail mix all day. And then somebody noticed a light in the distance coming towards us, so that was the train. And so we all had a red jack shirt or something like that. So there are 8 of us standing there waving these things, and the train goes zoom right past us. And you should have seen the faces fall on these guys. And I realized that what was passing us were freight cars. There must have been 50 of them. And at the very end of the train, there were 2 passenger cars. So the engineer stopped, and the conductor looked out of the passenger car. Actually, it was a baggage car, and he said, "Would you guys like a ride?" I said, "Yes, we would." He said, "Well, climb on." And I said, "Where?" He said, "Just up here through the door." Well, I could not get up the ladder into the baggage car, so these guys got behind me and they all pushed, and eventually I made it. I was so weak. So I said, "Can we go sit in the passenger cars?" He said, "No, they're full of Indians." And so I walked in there, and you could tip the seats either way, so you could have 2 seats facing each other, and there was usually a squaw and a baby in one seat, and the brave was sitting opposite her. And the whole car was just filled that way. So we went back and we sat on some boxes in the baggage car, and there was a troop from somewhere in Quebec that had canoed down a different river to Moosonee and had gotten on the train, and they were going back to Cochrane. So our guys started cutting patches off their shirts and trading with these French Canadian scouts. So eventually we got back to Cochrane, probably about 5 o'clock at night or something like that. Yeah, so Andrei Kamenetsky met this girl that was riding the train, and her dad taught something at Louisiana State University, but they had a cottage up there in northern Ontario, and she was up there visiting the cottage. And Kamenetsky, being kind of a friendly guy, was telling her that he was going to go to school in Switzerland, I think, that fall, and she said that she would would be passing through the airport, I think at Zurich, and Andre was supposed to come back the day after she passed through, so he was going to meet her there, but he missed her somehow. I found out later that he never did catch up with her, but that was rather interesting. Well, maybe that's enough for right now. You can shut that off.